Fair URANUS by Barry N. Malzberg. Originally published under the pseudonym of K. M. O'Donnell in a collection of the author's work entitled In the Pocket and Other SF Stories in 1971. This was actually released as a two-book omnibus with his short novel Gather in the Hall of the Planets, to be found on the reverse side. It was seen again in print just twice, first in a Portuguese magazine in 1972, then in an Italian one in 1974. The author passed away just over a month ago on December 19th, 2024. He is the reason I rediscovered my love of last century's science fiction when I took a chance on his collection called Out from Ganymede. And it's largely from that moment that I was inspired to start this channel. For just over a year, the channel's avatar image was from the cover art of his novel Harovitz World, which is about the decaying psychology of a science fiction writer and the resultant identity confusion between himself and the pseudonym he writes under and his main character. Malzberg was as brilliantly insightful and creative as he could be depressing and bluntly cynical. This reading is dedicated to him. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. Fair URANUS. 1. Coming in deep on the first orbit, looking at the gray and muddled surfaces of the planet which remind him of nothing so much as the insides of a grenade casing, Needleman has a pure moment of satisfaction. He has made URANUS. No matter what happens to him from this point onward, no matter how successful or disastrous the mission, they cannot say of him that he did not accomplish the primary objective, which was to reach this fair and beautiful, this serene and floating outpost in the skies. The sons of bitches thought I didn't really have it, Needleman mumbles, shaking his head at the expanse of the plains, popping stimulants into his mouth. Well, this'll show them. It is only a pity that he cannot, at this moment, use the contacts to tell them what he thinks of them, how he can meet their contempt and hatred with a contempt of his own, which goes far beyond even their capacity to assimilate. But that would not be fair, of course. The contact, rare and valuable, must be kept open only for official communication, and officially speaking, the sensors alone have informed them of the orbit, the success, the connection. Everything else would be a superfluity, an extension of the already known, and in any event, Needleman thinks, changing mental gears, he can show them by his silence that he is better than all of them, that he can meet contempt with grace, laughter with contentment, bitterness with humility. Everything is relative. It is all relative. It is a question of adjustments. Needleman closes all the visors, turns the phones to off, and settles himself on the couch for an 8-hour nap to complete the first orbit. There is nothing to be done until he comes around again. Dreaming, he thinks of sheep and flowers, trickles of water in the wood, the deep oaken sound of a stricken moose calling to him from a departed hillside. 2. Needleman's mission is certainly rare and dangerous. His connection to URANUS is the last best hope of humanity, and if he fails, all of mankind will as well. The evil and dangerous Lalar people, scourge of several galaxies, have been conducting raids upon the solar system for the last 50 years, their intention clearly to expurgate humanity from the third planet so that all of Sol's system may be theirs to continue their terrible and inhuman path of conquest through the galaxy. They have already planted attack centers on Mercury and Venus, Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, and most of the asteroids, avoiding in their terrible cunning actual contact with Earth, which, lacking the proper technological devices, can only wait helplessly while the seeds of annihilation are sown, not being able to send its own courageous armies into space to fight the Lalar at their source. For reasons best known to themselves, simple arrogance is suspected, or perhaps their astronomers are incompetent. The Lalar have left alone Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and it is to Uranus, the nearest unoccupied outpost, to which Needleman has been sent with his depth charges and cosmic bombs, dreams, and terrible devices to set up the counterattack upon the dreaded Lalar. It was feared that the instant the ship was launched into space, the surveying equipment of the Lalar would have deduced both it and its purposes and have blasted it out of the sky. But somehow the observation of the enemy seems inacute. Needleman has reached Uranus in 3 Earth days and nights without intervention. There is the question of terror, of course, and all the way past the orbit of Jupiter, Needleman had sung songs, the songs which had been popular in his youth, with certain side excursions to the classical repertoire intermixed with an obscenity or two. But by Jupiter, or 2 million miles beyond, when it became apparent to him for the first time that he might actually accomplish the goal of Uranus, all of Needleman's terror had dropped away like a cloak, and now he dreams in silence, his pastoral imagery his emblem of courage, or so he would think if he were conscious. 4 tranquilizers have made sure that he is not. 3. The actual motives of the Lalar were never quite deduced in the vast center where Needleman worked, and which was for various reasons the only institution on Earth thought capable of making such a judgment. The technological cadre talked much of entropy and simultaneous evolution and the finiteness of space, but were never quite as convincing as the metaphysicians. In 2212, by government edict, 5 metaphysicians had been assigned to the center on a provisional basis, and since then, through primogenitus and the rule of cultures, had expanded to an appreciable, if distinct, minority, who wrote long treatises on the interweaving of original sin and entropy, which caused all kinds of difficulties in the national councils, since they raised certain issues which under no circumstances did the council feel itself competent to solve. Needleman himself tried to think about it as little as possible. By the best calculations of the mathematical staff of the center, it would be at least 30 years until the deadly Lalar made their actual attack on Earth proper, and he figured that that was time enough to take care of his basic needs and even lead a satisfactory life. Besides that, he was on a 20-year assignment to the center, and it was difficult in the nature of things to look too far ahead. Nevertheless, from the time that he found that the mission devolved upon him, and that upon his shoulders and no others might the fate of mankind rest, he found that he had been thinking about it constantly. The least that could be asked of a man with such an important task is that he have a certain sense of perspective and history. The trouble was that the more he thought about it, the more Needleman thought that the metaphysicians were right, and this was particularly disturbing because he was not even quite sure what original sin and entropy, with a capital E, was exactly about. "Don't worry about it," the director had said. "Your training is fundamentally technological, and if you stay in that line, everything will work out satisfactorily. The important thing is to make sure that the charges are set up properly. If we ever get you into orbit, we don't want a lashback." Needleman had thanked the director very much. It was certainly something to know that the center would take care of the background if he took care of the actions, but he was really not quite as simple-minded as he once thought he had been, and the thing was that he could not get one thought from his mind, that possibly the Lallar, looking at things from their side of the table, were right, and that there might be good and sufficient reasons in the universal scheme of things for the earth and mankind to be put out of action at the present time. All through the journey, these speculations had stayed with him, had formed counterpoint to his popular songs, had shaped and structured even his fear, had worked their way into his dreams, and now, even under the multiple dose of codeine, waiting with the more circumstantial part of him for the blind orbit to end, he cannot quite keep them out of his mind. Why not? A merry idiot voice has been asking Needleman for 200 million miles. Why not indeed? They probably have their own problems. The Lallar may have run out of space. They have a definite right to live, too. 4. Like most of the employees in his niche in the center, Needleman has had a very controlled life. Nevertheless, he was permitted a love relationship in the requisite time and circumstances, and this relationship left, perhaps, more of an effect upon him than was strictly provided for through the code. On the other hand, possibly not. He has no idea of the limits of approved behavior, precisely because, behaviorally speaking, he has always functioned as they told him to. Wrapped with him tightly in the night, lurching toward an outcome as complex and involuted as any he had ever known, Needleman had felt himself on the verge of a vast understanding, had suspected that if he could sustain this lurching, these feelings, this connection for only an instant or so more, he might get through and to the other side and see things as he never had before. But time and again he would tumble through, wheezing, staggering to some climax that was more like an expectoration, and then, inevitably, it would all begin again. He was told that he was functioning within normal limits, and when the requisite adjustments had been made, it had been taken away, but to this moment Needleman is still not sure of it, not sure of many things, not sure as to whether what he touched was an extension of himself or something serene and finite, corporeal and mysterious, as far from him as the other side of Uranus, never to be known except in the pictures he made during the lurching. It has affected his whole life, this mystery. He knows that it, and nothing else which the center provided, has anything to do with the Lallar, who only came after the fact and as an unforeseen intervention, but he cannot get over the feeling that all of it was somehow part of a scheme which developed upon him in personal and intricate fashion, and which he will settle in one way or the other when the charges are lit. He does not know which way he will light them. 5. Coming toward the end of his orbit and the sleep, Needleman has another kind of dream, although it may not be a dream. Perhaps it is a hallucination or an actual contact with the Lallar. The chief of that race stands before him, infinitely wise, infinitely patient, infinitely pained, wearing the robes of his high station and a crown of fire. "Forget this. Forget all of it," the chief says, extending a tentacle, or maybe it is a hand, toward him in an encompassing and gentle way. "All of it was vanity. The center, the studies, the manipulation, the mission, the whole nagging constancy of it, nothing but a dream, and now at last this space, an awakeness. It means nothing, I tell you. Forget that it ever happened. Float around Uranus now, and then turn the charges the other way, because there is no point to any of this. No point, I tell you. You see only a microscopic slant of the spectrum. We know things we can never tell you. We come from a scheme much vaster than yours. In that scheme all motive prevails, and in that motive a kind of conclusion. Listen. Be sensible, Needleman. From your point of view we may look like the enemy, but believe me, from ours we are pure protagonists. The chief winks, seems to shift in the light of URANUS, then drifts backward and somewhat to the right. Of course, I have to leave it in your hands, he said. The whole fate and outcome, I mean. If you want to set the charges against us, you can blow us out of your sky, and that's the truth. On the other hand, you can do it the other way and inaugurate a new era of peace and progress, galactically speaking. It's all up to you, Needleman, old friend. The decision has to be yours, but I tell you this much. Do not take it casually. You don't understand, Needleman says, trying to make it as clear as possible, because he knows that this dialogue is somehow central to the fate of humanity, to say nothing of his own life, and if he does not get it right now, he never will. I mean, I'm simply not made for these easy choices. I can't take it one way or the other way, all simple and clear. Besides, the charges might misfire either way, and then what? I might do exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do. You can't talk me into one way or the other, though. Consider your training, the chief of the Lalar says, and you'll find that if nothing else, it counsels you toward easy dichotomies. And on that ambiguous statement, he vanishes, popping into the air like a fine mist, or the body of Needleman's lover when he felt the first seizures of his own climax, and Needleman finds himself quite alone and quite conscious on the couch as the craft swings past the first orbit and into the second. URANUS, fair URANUS, coming through all the windows of his cockpit, and it is lovely. Oh, God, is it lovely to look at URANUS this way on this fine morning in 2315. No better place to be than circling URANUS with all the wonderful fate and testament of mankind riding on your back. And Needleman stumbles to his feet and goes to the machinery, finds that the machinery is ready to fire, mumbles to himself in contentment as he sets the charges, then picks up the contact. The hell with power loss. To tell them exactly, precisely, definitely what he is going to do. And as he begins talking, the very walls of the craft seem to curve and attenuate, almost as if they were listening, as the whole damned universe must, to Needleman's analysis of the final sense of it and what a man must do to cope. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.